Welcome to Master B2B, the world's first and only unwebinar series. We're taking on the key issues for manufacturers and distributors in a debate style format. My name is Brian Beck. Really excited to be here again today with Andy Hoare to talk about another key topic all around B2B or B2C tactics for B2B e-commerce. Andy is, for those of you who don't know him, he is a world-renowned expert and advisor around digital transformation for B2B companies. He's got almost a decade of background as running the e-commerce, B2B e-commerce practice at Forrester Research. He's the CEO of Paradigm B2B and my partner in this thought leadership series we call Master B2B. Andy, welcome again to our latest debate.
Yeah, great to be here. This is going to be another really good one. So for those of you who don't know Brian, our host, Brian's about 20 years in B2B e-commerce. He's a practitioner for many years, a consultant, one of the top thinkers in the space. He's the author of a book called $1 Billion B2B e-commerce, which, by the way, Brian, I have here again.
Of course. Thank you.
I put it on hiatus for a while, and I do always want to note that the best part is the foreword.
Of course, Andy, yes, of course.
That said,
you wrote.
Yeah, I mean, in good hands here with Brian. So let me turn it back to you and let's get started.
Great. So, Andy, this is an unwebinar. When you and I started this series, we wanted to do it because we really wanted to break through the noise and create something different and get to the core issues. And this is a debate. We have two teams today to talk about a really important topic. And so we'll get to introducing them in just a moment. But this is really about you, the folks who are listening today, participating in this debate. We want you to contribute your questions and comments in the Q&A chat bar. We'll get to as many of them during the debate as we can. So please submit those. We also had a lot of folks submit comments and questions in advance. So we're going to incorporate some of those into our debate today. So encourage you to continue to submit those. So today we're going to be talking about B2B or B2C customer experience. Is it the future of B2B e-commerce? That is the question. And, Andy, I spent, as you mentioned, 17 years in the B2C side of things, learning and making a lot of mistakes, fortunately doing some things well. But I mean, gosh, we were pioneering these tactics around site search and personalization and product reviews. Should you have them or not? And integration of social media and Prime-like fast shipping. How important are these things? So we cut our teeth, and there's a lot of best practices now on the B2C side that can be adopted by B2B. And the key question is, should they be, right? So we're going to hear from some practitioners today who are using these tactics and who are going to argue both sides of the equation on some of these key issues. So this is another burning issue. And we asked the question, Andy, on LinkedIn last week, is a B2C-like consumer experience necessary for success in B2B e-commerce? And gosh, we opened the floodgates. We got a lot of comments, thousands of views, shares, comments, etc. We got comments from Ricardo Caruso at Cepheid. We got Marco George at Zulik Pharma. We had Eric Nebbia from Masterlock, Josh Dunham from Reveal. We had a lot of folks. I like what Matt Dole, who's the CEO of American Fireglass, said. They're a manufacturer. He said, check this out, Andy, easy answer. We were a B2B business that started acting like a D2C, direct-to-consumer business, and our B2B sales have doubled in 24 months. That's a yes for me. And Andy, you'll get this. I asked him in the LinkedIn chat, I said, hey, so what do you attribute to your success? What are some of the reasons? He listed about 10 of them. His top three were fast and free shipping, fast and free shipping, fast and free shipping. Interesting, something that B2B often doesn't consider. So today we have hundreds of people, participating. Andy, I don't see who's logging in here. Matt Nickel from US Foods. We got Leslie Bell from Reynolds. We've got a ton of people from Stanley Black & Decker on the line. Jessica Miller's here from Sherwin-Williams. Stephen Javor's back, one of our contenders from Schneider Electric. Daniel Poppy from Safco. Hey, Andy, check this out. On this webinar today, we have the Dallas Cowboys. That's right. Lauren Chakran from the Dallas Cowboys is on. I'm not sure what the Dallas Cowboys want to know, but hey, we got the Dallas Cowboys on. We got everybody. So welcome everyone again. Andy, you're the data man here. So let's get to some of the data. What is the issue around this B2C, for B2B e-commerce? What's at stake here?
Yes, I'm really struck by that Dallas Cowboys one.
Yeah, isn't that funny?
Like, they ask us about cover two defenses and stuff.
That's right.
I can talk about it, but not in depth. No, so actually, yeah, it's a really interesting debate. We haven't had a debate about the debate on LinkedIn, which was also fascinating. But why don't we, show you a few things? So it's pretty clear that personalization, for example, which is the topic most people were talking about, has been warmly embraced by B2C. And if you look at the slide, you can see there's some pretty compelling statistics around this, all driving to the same point about, personalization driving or enhancing spending, right? Again, Kibo, Epsilon, Forrester, many groups have studied this. I'll just leave the slide on the screen for those of you who haven't seen it. I don't think there's any doubt in the B2C ranks that personalization works. Now, it's interesting. I often hear B2B people talking about adopting B2C like personalization. What you don't hear is the opposite. You don't hear B2C people talking about adopting B2B like personalization.
Yeah.
Because I think it's a different animal.
Yep.
That said, on the next slide, you'll see that, it's been warmly embraced by B2C, but it's also the case that B2B companies want B2C like personalization. I'm sure you've seen this too. I've seen it with clients. They do things like, we want to create an Amazon-like customer experience. Well, part and parcel of that is the personalization dimension. But B2C is driving the experience online. However, and this is the focal point of the debate today. On the next slide, you'll see B2C and B2B aren't the same. They're really different in terms of who's responsible, what the accountability is, and what authority exists. So for example, in the B2C space, I used to joke about this, that I'm responsible for buying for myself. I mean, I joke about this, that except for maybe justifying something to my wife or something I want to buy online, I don't have to justify what I want to buy for myself to anybody. In B2B, it's different.
Yep.
You might be buying as a part of a team or a company. In terms of accountability, when I buy something for myself, I answer to myself. But in B2B, I'm answering to the company. And by the way, in the most extreme condition, I can get fired for making a really bad decision. I'm not going to get fired from being my own consumer. And then in terms of authority, just to complete the thought here is that as a B2C, I'm spending my own money. And when a B2B company, I'm spending the company's money, which has all sorts of implications around price elasticity, et cetera. But clearly there are different circumstances. And so what we're going to debate today is, do the experiences have to be different? Can you just take B2C and slap it on top of B2B and say, we're all good? Or is B2B different and unique and requires a different approach?
That's right, Andy. So yeah, I think that's we're going to get into a lot of those things. And it's interesting. We got some comments in here. David Lee said, "Hey, fast and free shipping." To my comment earlier, how is that possible in B2B? Good question, David. We're going to get into that. And then it looks like Ben Lichtenwaller doesn't like the Cowboys. I don't know. So sorry, Cowboys folks. He must be a fan of a different team, Ben. I don't know. He was one of our contenders in the past too. Well, guys, listen. That was a great setup, Andy. Thank you for that. As always. And we want to bring in our contenders now. And we call them contenders for a reason. It's because they're on two different teams. And I'm sort of siding more, Andy, in this debate with what we're calling team consumerized experience, which is, really the folks that believe that we ought to be adopting a lot of B2C best practices for B2B. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce my team, the winning team, and then you can introduce your team, the not winning team. Our first contender is Kelly the Blaster Bennett. Kelly, welcome. Kelly is the global head of e-commerce for the $21 billion manufacturer Henkel. And Kelly, you guys don't make knives. You make a lot of other things. That's a different company. Right. Got it. So and so Henkel is a global manufacturer. And Kelly blasts through inefficient digital experiences by bringing B2C practices to B2B. Kelly believes that, this is her quote, modern B2B sellers must recognize that the B2B buyer has changed and now demands B2C-like experiences from their suppliers. Kelly, I agree with you. Welcome.
100%. Thank you. And team B2B, we're coming for you.
All right. I like the fighting words. All right. Our next contender is Tim, the Neutralizer Nelson, ex-professional wrestler. You were never a professional wrestler, were you? No. Okay.
No, not professional.
Well, but you know how to get in the ring and throw it down. The Neutralizer puts an end to bad B2B behaviors as the senior principal of unified commerce at Kibo Commerce. Tim comes from more than 15 years in the e-commerce and technology field. Tim was at IBM, Oracle, Infor. He's been around this industry. He closes. He really understands this and sees close up how this can impact B2B e-commerce. He says manufacturers and distributors that don't adopt B2C practices are risking their very relevance to buyers. Wow, those are some powerful words. Very relevance to buyers. Tim, welcome.
Thank you very much. As you can see, hair's down, gloves are off. I'm ready to go.
All right, let's go. Andy, introduce your team.
Yeah, so now the team that's going to win the debate, because we're far more qualified than your team is. So we got Stephanie, the Punisher Pike. And by the way, when I was talking to Stephanie about being a contender a couple of weeks ago, I had mentioned, hey, this is the argument. And she, embraced it wholeheartedly because she has a really interesting background. She started in B2C and she's come to B2B, and she has seen the transition. I think she's got a lot of insights about what applies and what doesn't. But the Punisher inflicts pain on pointless projects as the VP of e-commerce is basically $50 billion distributor, Ingram Micro. So this is not a tiny company. Mm-hmm. She has a distinguished career. She was at Thermo Fisher Scientific prior, Office Depot, again, a B2B, B2C company. And her quote is, many of the common digital commerce approaches just don't work in B2B. And I can't think of somebody maybe better qualified to make that statement than Stephanie. So welcome, Stephanie.
Why, thank you. And we're coming for you, B2C.
All right, so joining team B2B Centric is Greg the Snuffer Snodgrass. So stuffing out stupid strategies, say that 10 times fast, is the specialty of Mr. Snodgrass. Currently VP of B2B distributor sales at solution provider Commerce Hub, which we'll get to in a moment. The Snuffer understands innately how important it is to accommodate traditional B2B workflows. His quote is, companies that don't recognize that B2B is very different from B2C are taking big risks and will see commerce fail. So Greg, great to have you here today.
Awesome. Looking forward to snuffing the lights out of the B2C team. Let's roll.
All right, guys, it's about that time. We are ready to rumble. All right, Andy, round one is yours, sir. And folks, you get to vote at the end of this. So listen closely.
Okay, let's get going. So for more considered purchases, and this is really key here, we're not talking about buying printer toner necessarily. Considered purchases. Will B2B experiences be targeted at specific people within a company, so personalized, or specific roles within the company? So we're getting at this sort of, in B2C, it's a person. In B2B, not necessarily. It might be a person with a role. That person may leave, be replaced. The company is a larger organization with group purchasing habits, etc. So Team Consumerized, Kelly, I'm coming to you first here. I assume you're going to tell us everything is personalized, just like B2C. Go.
Sure will. So I think your earlier quote you had was 72% of B2B people want a personalized experience like B2C. I think for a few reasons. One, B2B buyers are always often B2C buyers, and really you don't shift your expectations. I think the demand for personalization is so high. People want to engage with a person. They want to have a connection. They're looking for a unique customer experience that fits for them. I think even in the B2B space, when you look at something like ABM, you look at accounts and roles, but you really build personality profiles, and you're really targeting an individual in a way that you can engage with them. So 100%.
All right, well, Tim, we'll let you get in on this before we correct everything that you guys just said with Team B2B Centric. But why don't I'll give you a chance here, Mercy, to say a few interesting things.
Sure. One of the things that I think about when we're talking about personalization to the individual is, can or can't you? Is it a technical limitation or is it a personal limitation? And if you think about all of the capabilities across the technology landscape, a lot of times, when you're clustering and building profiles in generic form, it's because of the technology. But if you start asking the individuals what they want, if you ask the prospects that we talk to, over 50% of them want to individualize on a granular basis. And then even as Kelly mentioned, the individual wants to be important. They want to feel like them, that one-on-one relationship that you've built, usually between sales rep and individual, being able to transfer that one-on-one relationship between individual and digital is becoming imperatively crucial. And as technology advances, the more and more granular we can get, the more and more specific we can get on the profiles. And that is the empowerment that we're driving for these buyer personas.
Okay, so Stephanie and Greg, according to Kelly and Tim, everybody operates in a vacuum. They make all their own decisions. Everything is just wonderfully personalized, and nobody has to account for anything or answer to anybody. So I suspect you don't agree with that. Stephanie, let's go to you first. What are your thoughts on this?
Absolutely. For sure, there is the need to make sure we understand the individual, but at the end of the day, they're making a decision together. So here's a great stat that with companies with 500 or less employees, the average number of decision makers in any business decision is 7. So and that's in the small to medium business segment. You amplify that to the large segments, it's going to be even more than that 7, maybe 7D, right? So you can try to influence them, but at the end of the day, doing that at the role level is really key. So in the IT distribution space, we've got purchasing, we've got technical specialists, we've got the other sales teams, the vendors, having them all integrated in that experience is key to get to a group buying decision at the end of the road, which is one decision.
Well said. I'm supposed to be unbiased here, but I'm not going to be. That was extremely well said with a great stat. I'm putting my thumb on the scale on this one a little bit. So, Greg, you got something you want to add to this?
So I couldn't agree more with Stephanie, right? Like, I'm not a stat guy, but I'm a story guy. I spend most of my days talking to distributors and brands who are trying to figure this out. And so I was talking to an electrical distributor recently, and the guy was explaining how they have to deal with the person who's buying the product, the person who's approving that purchase, the person who's negotiated that contract. Got to keep them all happy. And the reason they have to keep them all happy and ensure that customer satisfaction is because B2B is different than B2C, right? It's not acquisition. They have to retain their clients, and they have to deliver, they want that customer lifetime value from a finite number of clients, right? They got to develop that long-term loyalty.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely true. And for those who have steeped in B2B, fully understand that. So let's go to our second question and continue the momentum here. So we're going to switch and talk to B2B centric first. So can you directly apply most B2B communications tools and technologies to B2C? And what I'm thinking here is things like ratings and reviews and chat bots and the like, things that have sort of been pioneered perhaps in B2C. Can you take those technologies and move them over to B2B and get the same results? So let me go to Greg first on this one. Greg, what are your thoughts on that?
So I think the key word here is most, right? I don't think most B2B, B2C communication tools will work. Like B2B is very sophisticated by and large, and every vertical seems to have their own different level of sophistication. And so like a recent example, again, was I was talking about like a multi-billion-dollar B2B distributor. They're trying to figure out content, right? Content, super technical, super specific, long tail. Like, how do you solve that with facts or FAQs or with chatbots? They have to provide a level of human expertise to make sure that those purchases are done correctly, or else they're dealing with a slew of problems, returns, people crashing the branches, the counters there to solve these problems. It just doesn't work at this point for most B2B companies.
So let's switch over to the other side and get the team consumerized view on this. Let's go to you, Tim. I know ratings and reviews is something that's been widely debated in B2B circles for years. It was adopted in B2C, kind of proved itself out. Now B2B companies are still struggling with that. There's good and bad here, but why don't you tell us your thoughts on whether some of these tools can be adopted straight from B2C into B2B?
Sure. One thing though, I mean, as we start talking about digital, we've got to talk about the difference between the old traditional model and the new model. In the new model and the digital model, the lights don't go off, and you can't have the fence ring, so to speak, of the customers that you're going to be impacting. When you have a digital presence on the internet, a lot of folks can access that information, and it could be a guy in a van that is trying to buy from your organization, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be that sophisticated 100-person team that is going through this buying process, right? And through that, the personal communication, even so, is something that they will trust. One is personal reviews and product reviews. They're going to trust their peers a lot of times more than someone they've never even met before. And then secondarily, even if they have connection with that associate, I would argue, what's the difference between chat and text? Because text is starting to skyrocket in terms of communication between an account manager and their customer. So, I'd say the only difference would be the record keeping of it. And if you can connect that record keeping, it's pretty much a chat.
So we got almost no time left. But I'm going to Kelly, get you a quick thought on this one as well.
Yep, I actually agree with one of Greg's points. I think the content is definitely different, but I think that the tools and the vehicles and the way you deliver it can be the same. I think chat, I think ratings and reviews, I think are relevant to both B2B and B2C.
All right, well,
All right, Andy, we're up. We're up on time. Let's go to the poll question. Thank you, guys. Good debate, good points. We got a comment as we're doing the poll here. Those in the audience, please go ahead and vote. The question is for more considered B2B purchases. That's important, Andy, right? For more considered B2B purchases, should you personalize experiences to specific people or tailor to specific roles and teams within a company? So go ahead and vote whether you personalize to individuals or to roles. I thought, Andy, that was a really interesting debate. Tim had a good point. He said the individual wants you to feel that you know them. I think that's an important point. And so, what are you going to do, Andy? Is your team going to put up, hey, welcome procurement person, role one to this digital experience? I mean, so you got to, I'm taking it to an extreme, but I think we've got to personalize to the individual and tailor it to the individual. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, all this to me rolls up into a really important concept, which is trust.
Yes.
That's what really matters here. Ratings and reviews, all these technologies, they're all about enhancing transparency, which you could argue is by the transitive property of logic leads to trust. And so I remember I had this debate years ago with people in the B2B space who said, we don't want any negative reviews online.
Right.
And you had this in B2C, I'm sure, too. And on the face of it, sounds great because they want to kind of manage everybody's expectations. Well, but that is opaque. It's not transparent. And actually, the research has shown definitively that having some negative reviews mixed in with positive reviews enhances the credibility of the positive reviews. Why? Because it creates transparency and ultimately trust. And that's what everybody's looking for. Consumers, B2B buyers, whomever, they want to be able to trust that who they're buying this thing from is somebody who's worth buying it from.
Yep. We got a comment in here from David Lee who says that you might be overestimating the power of the individual within the corporation. Interesting. That's a good comment, David. So you would argue that it's more about the role than it is the individual per se. We had another comment here, Andy, from Leslie Bell, one of our participants here. We have, for all of our online users, we have very few that have approvers in the ordering process. Most know the restrictions and behave accordingly. Interesting. So, I think, thank you. Keep contributing comments, folks. I think your point about trust is important. And I think the days of transparent, you have to be transparent. We learned this in B2C years ago, Andy. You had to be transparent, allow people to weigh in. I believe product reviews are very important to adopt in B2B. I've heard arguments the other way. I think it's important like you do. But let's go back. We need to go to our next round. So let's get ready to roll for round 2. Here it comes. The ding ding. Excellent. So this is my round, Andy. If you could keep time for us, appreciate that. Thank you, sir. So topic of round 2 is, will most B2B purchases be self-service or sales enabled? So our first question is, can you make the most of the B2B buying process, or most of the B2B buying process self-service? Kind of returning to it, Andy, an earlier question we had about, is this the death of a B2B salesperson? A little bit of that in here, but guys, so can you make the most of the B2B buying process with self-service? We're going to go to Team Consumerized first, and Kelly, I'm going to call you out here, Blaster. What say you?
Yes, you definitely can make a lot of the process self-service. I think there is a quote maybe from Gartner that 80% of B2B transactions will be digital. I think there's an expectation that people want something, they want it quick, they want it fast. I also think from a selling side, it increases automation. It allows you to get really great data salespeople can mine and leverage that data to then create an even more personalized one-to-one relationship with the people that they're contacting. But I think, my only caveat would be, I think a bit it depends on the business, what good or service you're selling. But I think in general, a lot of it can be self-service.
Interesting. Okay. And Neutralizer Nelson, I think you might want to add on something there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the consumer is already behaving on a digital realm. If you look at research, I think even Gartner did some research around what type of behavior does the digital buyer have, and they're already saying that close to 80% of the digital buyer is already on the digital presence, researching the product and finding information about it. So if you can transact in a self-service environment, great. And again, it goes back to, are you not doing it because you can't, or are you not doing it because you don't want to? I mean, a lot of things like technology advances has really propelled us into a self-service environment. I mean, who thought even 5 years ago that I would be able to go online, buy a car and go pick it up at a vending machine, but I can do that today.
Yeah, it's fascinating, Tim. So no, great comments. Thank you for that. I think probably the Punisher Pike is not going to agree with you. Punisher Pike, make your case.
Oh my goodness, no. Self-service has a model within the B2B world of automating, I would say low-level tasks, right? Every B2B company that's smart is automating those things like order status and tracking. That's a no-brainer. That should be automated. No one should be calling your call centers to do that. However, when Kelly, she cited that 80% of transactions are digital, that's the moment of hitting the buy button, right? And that often happens within a procurement department, B2B, right? Within selling is complex. There are multiple stakeholders that we just talked about, how you influence each of those people. There are definitely digital touches through ABM and other capabilities, but there is that human element as well of how do you integrate that human element and create a blended approach. So at Ingram, we call that moments that matter. So what are the moments that matter for our customer, and how do we highlight those and amplify them with digital instead of negating them with digital? The last thing I'll say is that, there's a statistic from McKinsey that said that 85% of reps in 2024, by 2024, will be hybrid reps, leveraging phone, email, video chat like we're talking now, and not just there's traditional field sales motion. So we're moving to hybrid. Yes, we have digital, but it's not self-service.
It's interesting. Yeah, that moments that matter thing, Stephanie, we use that in consumer, 10, 15 years ago. That's such a consumer trend. It's really interesting to hear you say that term specifically, moments that matter in the customer journey. Okay, so you're kind of making a little bit of a case for B2C there. So, well, great, good stuff. Greg, anything you want to add to that? Are we good? Next question?
I think she nailed it. That's awesome.
Okay. All right, good. So the next question then is, will company-specific contract pricing or open marketplace pricing dominate going forward? I think B2B centric is probably going to side with the contract pricing here. Greg, you got something to say on that?
Yes, I would say there's two sides of this coin, right? So, and I don't see specific contract pricing given way to marketplace pricing. So if you look at it like from the distributor side, they have like an 80-20 rule. 80% of their clients are driving a massive amount of their revenues. They want to be able to deliver and protect those relationships at all costs, whether it's through white glove service or special relationships or that special contract pricing. And on the flip side of that, those companies that they're working with that distributor, they want that as well because they need their business to run smoothly, run seamlessly. Like having that relationship in place is really a competitive advantage for them. And without it, they would lose that.
That's interesting. Thank you for that, Greg. And by the way, Punisher, we had Jeff Hoogerhide just chimed in. He said, did she just predict the death of the B2B salesperson? Wow.
Oh, we're morphing. We're migrating to hybrid.
Okay. Well, good. Now let's go to the other side and let Tim, you want to respond to what Greg said about contract versus marketplace pricing?
Sure. It goes back to trust. Before you had to trust that you were getting the best pricing, and you were empowered by that, by the negotiation process, and you felt that you got the best price. But now with social networks, now that communication is easier than ever, price discovery is becoming a lot more transparent than it was in the olden days. And when I say olden days, that could have been even 3 years ago, right? Because COVID has really impacted our lives more than just my hair, right? It's really impacted our sales force, our digital engagement. It has impacted a ton of stuff, but also has impacted the way and how transparent we are with our customers. And the more that price discovery is easier to be accessed, the more that you're going to have vendors coming out with additional price and competitive pricing. And now it just creates and evolves into a marketplace.
Yeah, it's interesting. I read recently, Tim, a stat that said up to 30% of B2B buyers will still be working from home at the end of this year. So the 30% you can't visit if you have a physical sales force. Kelly the Blaster Bennett, I think you want to add in something here. Go for it. Blast away.
I definitely do. I have two really quick themes. One, I said it earlier, B2B buyers are also B2C buyers, which I think is a really critical point, and also transparency. I think B2B and B2C, there's an expectation for a high level of transparency, which leads to trust. I think marketplace pricing is definitely the way things are going to go.
That's interesting. So the world is becoming a transparent place. I have to agree with you. So as you guys think about, different types of products and industries that are more likely to shift, do you guys have any perspective on that, where some products or some types of products will shift more to self-service versus being more full service? Any differences as you think about the product assortments you're bringing to market? Maybe the Punisher or the Blaster want to address that question.
I'll jump in. I'm literally talking about that today, right? Is like, what is our assortment and how do you target we call them hot sellers. Those kind of SKUs online, for sure, you want those to be automated. But for the more complex selling, the quoted products that are services and software related, you're going to need to think differently about that.
Interesting. And Blaster, anything you want to counter to that argument?
I would say, I'm trying to think.
So I think we're in violent agreement.
I think I'm good.
Okay, fair enough. Well, good. So Andy, I think we're just about out of time on this. So I think we could probably go to the poll question. Thank you guys. Great points on this one. There it is. So our question is, going forward, will most B2B purchases be self-service or sales enabled? Self-service versus sales enabled. These are your two choices there. Go ahead and select those. Andy, what'd you think of that round?
Well, I'm torn on this one. You can imagine.
Yep.
As the author of Death of a B2B Salesman, I definitely embrace the idea of self-service. On the other hand, for considered purchases and for, more complicated stuff, group purchases, you can't just throw it online and expect people to buy it. There's a process around this, and processes are risky and complicated and time intensive and require people. I hate to say this, at the end of the day, it's going to depend on what the product is, and it's going to depend on who the buyer is. But I don't want people to underestimate the complexity of B2B buying and the domain experience that you can't just productize. Somebody doesn't know exactly what this thing is to purchase. They're not going to just take a chance and return it later, like you might a pair of shoes or a pair of pants. If you're buying a part for a machine and it's not the right part because you didn't talk to the right people and you get the right information, again, back to that screen at the beginning, who's your job over it? So It really depends on what you're buying.
Yeah, as Ken Novak weighed in here, he said, great debate. Part of the complexity in B2B is the wide array of buyer types. Global OEMs often have a procurement department to serve, as well as mom and pops in the aftermarket. So, I think he's right. I think we have to think about, and if you're a manufacturer, distributor, if you think about the different your journey of how customers are buying things across your entire product line, and that may be very different. The Punisher mentioned moments that matter, right? And that's really important. We learned that a long time ago in B2C. You've got to understand your buyer personas and their journey, and you need to make sure you're meeting their needs. And I think, in my opinion, if these are self-service purchases, Andy, if self-service wins the day with certain parts of that catalog, you have to deliver B2C-like functionality, like product reviews, like easy checkout, like fast shipping, like all those things. We're getting into shipping a little bit next. These are things that I think you have to deliver to your customer because they expect it. And as Kelly the Blaster said, the B2B buyer is the same as the B2C buyer. They are the same person. And guess what, guys? They're almost all millennials now. So they are natives of Amazon. You've got to address their needs. Okay, we got to go. We're out of time on round 2. Here we go. Here is round 3. Ding, ding. Thank you. All right, Andy, this one's yours. I'll keep time. Go.
All right, so round 3 is all about delivering fulfillment. And so we want to tackle two distinct issues here. One is around omni-channel and the other one is around drop shipping. So first question is, can you directly apply B2C like omni-channel techniques to B2B? I'm thinking of things like buy online, pick up in store. I mean, that's popularized in B2C. Will that work? Can that work in B2B? Let's go to Team Consumerize first. Kelly, you have some thoughts on this?
I do. And since I froze in the last one under the intimidation of the Punisher, I better redeem myself on this one. So I would say, I think, yes, I think in this case, I think it's a win for customers. I think, again, it's the expectation. People want things fast. They want things to be easy. I think it's a win for distributors, for retailers. They aren't spending money to ship things, so it helps their margin. I think even if the initial adoption is low on a B2B side of having a buy online, pick up in store, I think today it's becoming kind of an expectation or requirement. For me, it's a little bit of a hygiene level that you need to have it in place. And I think, as it was mentioned earlier, a lot of these buyers are millennials. And I think even if the initial doesn't catch on, it's going to continue to grow and just become something that's a standard expectation from all B2B buyers.
Yeah, so you may have frozen at the stare of the Punisher, but you got back up and threw a few there. So it's many rounds, right? So Tim, what are your thoughts on this?
I agree a lot with what Kelly said, but I also want to add that I think it's a psychological perception of your business and how you're interacting with your customers, right? When you're talking about flexible fulfillment, meaning providing additional capabilities to your customer, there's a perception that you are accommodating them rather than them accommodating you. And a lot of times that type of interaction, psychological perception, really allows them to engage with you on more of an intimate level. You see this even on the B2C side. Even though buy online, pickup in store is available, the amount that retailers are seeing it actually being executed is relatively low, and it was a relative something that was unexpected. But the fact is, it's still driving top line revenue because it's allowing the customer to dictate how they want their products fulfilled.
Yep. Before we go to the B2B centric team, I have two good chat comments in here that I've got to read. One is, what happens when your product weighs 300 pounds? So apparently you can't just pull up a van and push it in the back. And then David Lee, who seems to be very prolific in his writing here, said, Stephanie's stare is quite intimidating, just saying. So,
right?
So Stephanie, this is perfect because now you can
taking them down.
You can stare at David Lee as well as the rest of us. But my personal feeling, this I want to get your thoughts on, is that buy online, pick up in store is great for certain things, but in B2B, there's another dimension here, which like the 300-pound consideration, installation, maintenance. These things complicate things when it comes to buying online, picking up in store. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's a different animal in omnichannel. I started my e-commerce career at Circuit City, which was a pioneer in buy online, pick up in store, launching it in 1999. It's funny, side note, I wasn't there, but when they launched it, they threw it in as an extra piece of code thinking, oh no, we're not sure if people will care or use it. And it became one of the hallmarks of the company all the way to the very end. So, and really supply chain is the heartbeat of e-commerce. You can't do it without a great supply chain system. So in the omni-channel space for B2B, I perceive it's more of it depends on how they're getting their product. You mentioned like installation, that's often a service that we sell to our customers. So we don't want to give that away for free. It's all about getting them their items when they want it and how they want it. And so I do think there's some lessons to be learned from a B2C omnichannel perspective. It's just nuance. It's different in the B2B world.
Greg, your thoughts?
So I would agree with Stephanie. I think she nailed it right. The only thing I would add is, like, we went through this with B2C, 10, 15 years ago. B2B companies are certainly looking at it, but it's not easy. Like, I had literally a laughing conversation with the guy who was like, hey, we're just going to dictate. We're going to just, the branches and the DCs, they're all going to have to adopt to this behavior. And then he started laughing after he said that, right? It's hard, and it's just beginning.
Excellent. Well, let's go to question number 2. And I think we're pretty good on time here, but Brian, just give me a sense for that when you get a moment. So this is a question about drop shipping. And can B2C teach B2B key lessons about drop shipping? Now, this is interesting because I think there's a debate about who actually can teach whom lessons on drop shipping. In fact, there's a comment in the window about how pharmaceutical companies have been doing, pickup for businesses for years. And so let's talk about this. Let's go to you first, Tim, on Team Consumerized. I assume you're going to argue that Amazon Prime Quick Light Fulfillment is a new animal, and that B2B companies are being blindsided by this.
This goes back to the customer expectation. The buyers, again, are the millennial buyers that have been spoiled by the likes of Amazon. And even DHL did a study a couple of years ago that the expectation for delivery used to be as large as 7 days. Now imagine a retailer offering 7-day delivery today. I think that they would be going out of business relatively soon. But that same expectation is now bleeding into B2B. But how do you do it? And a lot of supply chain and B2B companies are looking to unload the risk of holding that inventory. And by unloading that risk, contracting with a lot of dropship vendors that can get closer to the customer and really drive and execute against that delivery experience.
So Kelly, where are you on this? You and Henkel, what do you guys think about what you can learn from B2C or what B2C can teach B2B in terms of drop shipping?
So I would say 100% agree with the comments of Tim. I think this one for me isn't even a debate. I think, the examples of pharmaceuticals is accurate. So it did happen in B2B, but when you look at what's happening in B2C from big box retailers, online retailers, they are killing it in terms of what they're doing, and they're raising the bar for everybody else. I think Tim mentioned the point just in terms of what expectations are, in terms of getting things quickly. And I would also say, from a retailer distributor side, you don't want to hold that inventory. It's more efficient for you not to do it. So I think even if it did start in B2B, which is debatable, that B2C is taking it to a whole new level.
Well, we're going to get that answer here from Greg and Stephanie. So where did it begin and who does it better? I mean, it's an interesting question about, you don't want to hold inventory. B2B companies are pretty darn efficient. And I think some companies have already figured this one out. But what do you guys think, Greg?
Yeah, so I would say I think the key word is learn to this. Like a lot of what Tim and Kelly just said, I 100% agree with. I don't think B2B companies have a lot to learn from B2C. I think they already get it. I think they watch companies like Grainger/Zorro or MSC Industrial. Like those guys are crushing it from a dropship perspective. Even if you look at some of kind of the B2B retailers, like what the Home Depot does or Staples does, like everyone's aware of that. And especially in the last 18 months, B2B companies are like, hey, we've got to make progress on this. We need to be able to deliver a sticky online solution. The only thing I see people being held back to this is kind of technical issues like old ERP systems, old eCom systems.
So Stephanie, what about you? What have you seen over the years, having come from B2C and B2B? Who does it better?
No, I really think this is different depending on the B2B company. At Depot, we did drop shipping a lot. We partnered with Commerce Hub and other partners like that to do that. At a company like an Ingram that is a distributor, that's part of our value proposition is holding inventory. So yeah, we're not going to be doing a lot of dropship. we process and deal with those things on behalf of our vendors and our resellers.
Well, Andy, we're just about out of time here. We actually are out of time. So good debate. I think we need to move to the poll.
All right. So which group does a better job today of leveraging dropshipping? Very simple question: B2C or B2B? Brian, what do you think about this?
So look, what I think a lot of companies don't realize, I'm very bullish on drop shipping, Andy. If in the numbers that Greg was citing, I actually have some stats here I pulled. In 2019, Grainger announced they got through its Zorro unit 19% revenue growth from endless assortment through its Zorro.com unit specifically by leveraging drop shipping. That is, and if you think about in the B2B side, what the traditional value is, and I know that the Punisher was talking about, hey, it's not something we're going to engage in Ingram, but I do see a lot of distributors actually engaging in it because of the assortment breadth opportunity. I think B2B, I think this is a natural step. Now, the differences I see is that a lot of B2B ordering through drop shipping is bulk. It's not the individual, if you think about, Home Depot drop shipping on their website and the consumer side or Macy's or whoever, it's individual items. So I think that's the one gap we have from B2B to B2C, but I'm very bullish about that model, particularly actually for distributors to expand their assortment online. What do you think?
Well, I think everybody's learning there's a long tail everywhere, including in B2B, as though B2B companies didn't know that. Many of them weren't taking advantage of that.
Right.
And so drop shipping really melds well with the long tail. Have somebody else own the inventory, have somebody else control the inventory, control access to the customer.
Yes.
And so drop shipping has become, I think, a lot more relevant, a lot more popular in B2B because of that.
I agree with you, but you have to be good at the B2C like experiences related to things like search. If you're why can Amazon with 600 million products on its website deliver a great experience that converts? By the way, the conversion on Amazon for Prime customers is over 70%. It's insane. So 7 out of 10 times someone visits, they purchase. What that means, Andy, is that you have to have a good B2C like experience to get people to the right products. So if you have 1 million products on your website as a distributor, the search has to be phenomenal, and the checkout has to be phenomenal. These are B2C lessons for B2B, and I think they're critical.
Well,
So
I'm gonna throw one thing in here.
Yeah.
B2C does not monopolize or dominate the idea of search. I think you can look at a lot of B2B companies that have pretty darn good search, better than a lot of B2C companies because of the combinations and the permutations, et cetera. So I agree with you. The online experience has to be very compelling. I just don't agree necessarily that it's dominated by B2C these days.
if we asked our hundreds of people on our webinar today, how many of you are happy with your search B2B, and particularly distributors, because they have a lot of products, I think 90% of them will say they're not happy with their search. And it's one of the most common things I hear, Andy, is where our search needs improvement. Our search needs improvement. I don't agree with you. I think there's lessons to learn.
Brian, it's a more complicated search. That's why.
Okay, fair enough. We can go there.
Have 18 different letter number combinations for SKU, and B2C it's like shirt. I'm exaggerating.
Okay, all right. Well, we could do a whole webinar on that one. I used to run e-commerce and apparel, man. I will go there if you want. Okay, we're out of time on that. We've got to go to our closing arguments. Let's bring back Tim and Greg to the stage here. We're going to give Tim an opportunity first to give some closing arguments and kind of talk about his perspective on all this. Go ahead, Tim.
Great. Thank you to Greg and Brian and Andy for this debate. I think it was a great debate. And as you heard, there's arguments to both sides. And at the end of the day, it's not a one size fits all solution. It's also not a light switch where you're just going to turn it on and all of a sudden it's going to be a different experience. It's very similar to B2C in the early 2000s. It's an evolution. I think it really depends on the technical maturity that you have of your organization, the type of industry that you're in. Also, you got to think about not only the customers that you have, but the customers that you want to have. A common misconception that I've seen, with businesses that are growing versus businesses that are not is, those that are not are only focused on the customers that they have, and they really need to start evolving to see how they can acquire the customers that they want to have. And so at the end of the day, it's probably going to be a mixture of a lot of capabilities, a lot of functionalities. But I think that the really important thing is the ability to be agile, to accommodate the changes of the environment, to accommodate the changes of your network, and then accommodate the changes of the customer expectations. And if you're building an infrastructure and a business that's agile, I think you will be successful.
Great, Tim. Thank you for that. Appreciate that. Greg, what are your closing thoughts here?
Hey guys, thanks so much for doing this. This was super fun. So I'll keep this really succinct instead of going through my long list here. I'll just use, been doing this at eBay and at Commerce Hub, trying to figure out win-win situations for distributors and manufacturers, whoever. I would say, here's the word, unique. And I think Stephanie had that on our whiteboard behind her. There's no situation that is the same at any of these companies, right? Every company will say ours is a little bit different, or we do it differently, or that won't work, right? Now, maybe for some kind of MRO type distributors, maybe they can make the B2C playbook work. But I think in each case, generally speaking, for B2B sellers, like you've got to figure out what works for them and how to make that fit, and so they can grow. Period.
Fantastic, Greg. Now that's good comments. And guys, both of you, thank you for participating in the debate today. We need to now go to our final piece of our discussion. Here it's time for the decision. Roll it. I love that music. It's so dramatic. I say that every time. So, Annie, interestingly, we got a comment in here from Robert. It says, B2B suffers in search. Suppliers need to harmonize their data before better search can happen. That's going to be, we're going to have some discussions, and we have a roundtable coming up on that topic. So that's a big one. Thank you for that comment, guys. So we're going to go to the decision here. But let's, kind of before we get into that, let's talk about some kind of final thoughts, Andy. What are some takeaways for you from this debate?
Well, I'm going to go back to the beginning, because I said there was a debate about the debate, and it took place on LinkedIn prior to this. There were some really interesting comments that were shared, and I just want to read a few because I think a consistent theme is going on here. So we've got Mike Schmitz from American Solutions for Business saying, has B2B shifted to the point where there is no more need to focus on a shopping experience rather than pure efficiency in B2B? Similarly, Jamin Heller at Traffic Safety Warehouse says B2B buyers were product seeking and price driven rather than experience driven. So is the B2C like experience worth the effort? Will it move the needle? And then finally, Nick Ostergaard at Toyota said, hey, will business users care enough about true B2B experience or B2C experience to drive fundamental change in their procurement? Now, two quick comments about this. One is, somebody mentioned earlier that it's not either or, it's an and. Well, maybe it is an and, but when you're investing time and effort, it's an or. Right. Are you going to spend money on this or that? I talked to a company the other day that said, hey, we're trying to decide whether we're going to spend money on our own experience on our website or spend money on making ourselves work better with Amazon, for example. The answer might be we're going to do both, but at the incremental level, where are you going to spend that extra dollar? And these are the tough decisions people have to make. So the second point is about that procurement point by Nick. That's actually going to be our next webinar in October. And it's about e-commerce versus e-procurement. And I think his point is correct. Where do you spend your time and effort? Mm-hmm. That's the question.
Yes. So my key takeaway, that's actually a great question. And we're going to debate that one on our next webinar. To me, the headline today is that B2C is critical for B2B e-commerce, but it's where you use it and how you use it, and using the Punisher's language. It's at the moments that matter in that customer journey. I think we can all acknowledge that B2B is different. It is different, and there's differences in the complexity of the product in many cases. But then there's a fair amount of the industry that isn't. Think about fasteners. Think about ink toner cartridges. Think about things that the buyer knows they want. They're easy to find. They don't have a lot of variance. It doesn't need a consultative sales process. That stuff, I think you have to deliver it in a B2C like Amazon like experience with fast shipping, with product reviews, with easy shoppable site search navigation, great big pictures of products, not a plug into your green screen ERP. So I think the smartest companies that I work with, these days, Andy, are saying I need to be where the customer is. I need to accommodate them, and I'm going to use these digital tools to understand how to best present and be in the places they are, both from a search perspective, beyond Amazon, et cetera, but also deliver them that consumer-like experience on my own site. And when it's consultative, then enable the sales team with the data they need to be most effective for that customer at the moment that matters in that particular type of customer journey for that persona. So I think it's a little bit of both, right? We got to recognize it's different, but I think B2C is absolutely critical. And I believe the vast majority of B2C features will work for that portion, which is more of the transactional, easier sale process, for products.
Well, like Mike Tyson famously said, it's been overdone, but it's such a great one. Everybody's got a plan to get punched in the face, and I think that's exactly what's going on with B2C. It sounds great, but in reality, when you get punched in the face and the reality hits you, it doesn't always work as advertised. But on that note, I know we only got a couple of minutes left. Let's go to the results. Okay. Wow. For more considered purchase, should you personalize experience to a person or tailored to a role? Looks like B2B won out here. It sounds like it's not really about the actual individual person, but rather the role in the team, because it's more group buying. Again, your point is valid. If it's targeted to an individual, then obviously it's a B2C like personalized experience, but B2B is inherently more complex.
Yep. Interesting. Let's bring up the next one.
So going forward, will most B2B purchases be self-service or sales enabled?
Self-
Self-service, I'm torn on this one. I actually believe that self-service is underdone. I think, even configure price quote, yes, it helps sales enablement, but you could have take off the quote part, configure price, and that becomes self-service. Any NAED, the National Association of Electrical Distributors, a couple of years ago had some great research about what percentage of what distributors sell in that industry is really self-serviceable, and it was like 2/3.
Wow. Well, there's your 2/3 right there.
Yeah.
Right.
Very,
All right,
very
let's do the next
right.
question. What's round 3?
Which group does a better job today of leveraging drop shipping? Okay, B2C won. It's only because it's believed to be the case. No, I'm joking. Both are doing it. B2C has done more of it because they were earlier. They're earlier adopters to this.
Yeah.
But I think in the end, it's the tortoise and the hare, and the B2B will catch up. And probably in the end of the day, we'll be talking about how B2B does a better job of drop shipping in a couple of years.
Yeah, it's a real needle mover in B2C. I know that, a lot of big guys use it. Okay, so just a couple minutes left here. We want to let you guys know. And number one, thank you to our panelists, our contenders. They were fantastic. Andy, anything you want to add to that before we?
There's a lot here. I mean, I think that was a great debate. I think people who are really interested in the nuances of it got a good dose of that here. You have to decide for yourself. Maybe on some questions you're on one end, and on some questions on the other end. But our goal here is to stretch your thinking and to bring in really smart people who have been there and done that to share their experiences. So yeah, it was great. You did a great job hosting again. I want to thank our panelists for coming. And we'll look forward to next month.
Yes, and our goal, everyone out there, is to make you masters of B2B. So we look forward to our next debate. Hope you'll join us. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll see you next time.